Hey guys, hope everybody's doing well. Welcome to my little short slideshow of what really happened during the American Civil War and how basically if in today's time, if you want to speak of secession or secede or create an independent nation by the people, for people, because they no longer have any confidence in their own governments, you are a racist. You are a neo-Nazi. You are a white supremacist. And what about other cultures, Mike, doing this in other countries that do want independence and want to be free of their local regimes? You're still a white supremacist. It doesn't matter what skin color you are. They base you as a racist, neo-Nazi, bigot, white supremacist. It doesn't matter what skin color you are. You are anyone that's into separation. And now there's been talk here in Canada about Western Canada seceding from the East. There's been talk of the red states seceding from the blue states of America. There's been talk of all kinds of different secession movements. Now behind me, that's a Catalonian flag. Now a lot of people don't know too much about the whole Catalonian flag and what happened with Catalonia, but that was one of the more recent secession movements that took place that basically involved almost every citizen in Catalonia getting behind it. And what happened with that, we'll take a look. Anyways, so let's kick this off, folks. Thanks for joining me, being part of the channel, liking and subscribing. And here we are. There's a Confederate flag there with a soldier there, a black soldier sitting in front of taking his photo. These were family op photos that were taken, and photos were sent to the families back home. And let's kick this off as basically, here's your rebel stuff. So Confederate, if you want to be a Confederate, aka a rebel, or you want to secede, or you want to leave the current, you want to jump ship, but you can't take your land with you, obviously you're going to have to secede from the mainland, right? And any of that, you are considered a racist. And if you have anything Confederate or a Confederate labeled, you are a racist. And that's what they do. They label it, they brand it, and it's permanently instilled in history as being an enemy of the state. An enemy for what? Wanting to be independent. So let's move on. And the flag behind me is Catalonia, the Catalonian Independence movement, and we're talking the entire population, 98%, because the 2% that couldn't get on the streets were immobile, couldn't or confined, or crippled or something. But 98% of Catalonia stepped out onto the streets for years before they pulled the trigger on the pandemic. They had to pull the trigger on the pandemic. You know that, right, folks? So, and there it is right there. Independencia now. And they want independence now. Independencia. Here is the streets of Catalonia. It was just a massive. So there it is right there. Show you guys where it is. It's this region here that wanted to conveniently separate. That would have been a perfect separation because you got your water to import and export, which they do, by the way. And they have their own economy, their own everything, and they don't have to worry about the problems that Spain was creating and these multi-level governments. So there's more images here, and the Catalonian movement went on for a good while, and it became a major, major, major problem. And the pictures there of some of the leaders. And anybody that... What is the story of Catalonian independence and what happens next? Well, nothing happened. Anyone that was part of the secession movement to gain independence from a ruthless dictator, socialist, leftist, crazy. So people are already feeling this problem before they pulled the trigger on the pandemic. They already knew things weren't well. So Catalonia had its own flag, its own Catalan language, its own everything. It did not need to be part of Spain. But of course, and they just arrested and put everybody in jail that was involved. Now, when you see this video about here, what's behind the Catalan movement for independence? Now, when you watch this video, you play through it, it doesn't show you any of the actual movement. It just shows you a couple of people in the rain, and it shows you a couple of people waving flags, a bunch of empty streets, right? So a little bit of history doesn't show you anything. Doesn't show you any of this stuff here on how the people want to be free of the Spanish government, Spanish world. Catalonia is not Spain, and you see it everywhere. Now, of course, secession movements have succeeded, but if you guys want to see more about this, you could go ahead here. We did do Mike and the Knight, World War Woke, Economic Perfect Storm, Catalonia, and the Taking Down the Statues, 5 years. And Mike and the Knight, USA Secession Movement, higher gas prices ahead, mass shootings ramping up 5 years ago. And yeah, we discussed, so that's just looking up Catalonia across our channel. There's a couple of videos we made about this. We were very vocal about Catalonia because you want independence, you want freedom, you want to secede, you don't want to be part of the current status quo, and many people around you feel the same. So now let's get into the Civil War and what happened, how it happened, and why we've been misled all these years. So here is the Panic of 1857. So this, wait, Mike, the Civil War was a few years down the road. Well, there was panic, there was problems happening, major economics, and that's the major problem of this whole Civil War. Everyone says, well, it was to free the slaves. It was never about freeing anything about slaves. It had nothing to do with slaves. It had a lot to do with economy and the crown. So we're going to get to that right now. So the Panic of 1857 was a financial crisis in the United States caused by the declining international economy and over-expansion of the domestic economy because the invention of the telegraph by Samuel F. Morse in 1884. The Panic of 1857 was the first financial crisis to spread rapidly throughout the United States. The world economy was more interconnected by the 1850s, which made the Panic of 1857 the first worldwide economic crisis. And in Britain, the Palmerston government circumvented the requirements of the Bank Charter Act of 1884, which required gold and silver reserves to back the amount of money in circulation. Surfacing news of this circumvention set off a panic in Britain. Yes, it did set off a massive panic in Britain because a lot of the money was just on IOUs and derivatives and no tangency to back the money itself. So they're trying to push for a transient whole currency. Now, failed banknotes. These bills from Kansas Territory aren't worth the paper they are printed on. So Kansas was truly the Wild West in the years leading up to the Civil War. Arguments over slavery made it perilous place to live. Drought caused food shortages, goods were scarce and expensive, and on top of everything else, there was almost no money. These banknotes speak of the wide open nature of Kansas economy during its early years, just after it opened for settlements in 1854. The federal government created the Kansas Territory. So the Kansas Territory was forced into joining the Union because of financial problems. Now, if you go here, they call it Bleeding Kansas. Okay, guerrilla warfare is referred to as Bleeding Kansas because of the blood shed by pro-slavery and anti-slavery. So, in today's times, obviously they rewrite history. It wasn't about pro and anti-slavery. It was more about economy and economics and feeding their families and keeping their economy above water. And obviously you go into today's times, you look at this, you see everything is related to slavery. And the American Civil War, April 12, 1861 to May 26, 1865, also known by other names, was the Civil War in the United States between the Union, the North, and the Confederacy in the South, formed by states that had seceded from the Union. Just like Catalonia, I showed you guys earlier, wants to secede. They want to secede. The cause of the war was a dispute over whether slavery would be permitted to expand into the Western territories. That is not true. That is not true. Leading to more slave states, and then that's how they tied it into Kansas. Kansas was an economic problem, not a slave problem. Or prevented from doing so, which many believed would place slavery on the course of ultimate extinction. Now, slavery at this time was already waning out. Slavery at this time was already fizzling out, right? It was fizzling out. The proof is in the pudding. It goes back to the Panic of 1857, where states weren't producing and they were falling short. And the South secedes. Southern states start seceding one after another, joining the Confederacy because they wanted nothing to do with the crown. What crown, Mike? Overseas, in England. They wanted nothing to do with the crown. They wanted nothing to do with the crown banking and the crown interest. All right? You remember, you guys, this is making sense? They don't want nothing to do with the crown. And when you secede from the crown, just like Libya wanted to create its own gold-backed currency, just like many countries wanted, obviously, when you secede or you want to implement a currency of sound money, freedom comes to you. You're a racist. You're a bigot. So the South secedes. And now this over here took me a while to figure out. And this is the national crisis. This is the headline here. Florida secedes from the Union. Alabama will resist Lincoln's administration. Secession triumphant in Louisiana. Now, what did they add here? Well, they added something that wasn't in here. And the South, and with our people, of course, slavery is the element of value and destruction of all that destroys all that is property. And you look for it, and you can't find it. Trying to find it, can't find it written in that time. Obviously, they rewrite history. Digital book burning. They rewrite history as they go along to make it fit the narrative, because anybody that speaks secession is a white supremacist, racist. It doesn't matter what color your skin are. So the Charleston Mercury Extra Union is dissolved. The Union's finished. And this is the map of the Civil War. Now, these are the buffer states or the uncontested states or the states. These states all wanted to join the South. They all wanted to join the South. And Kansas wanted to even join the South. But they were forced and muscled and obviously paid out by greedy bureaucrats to join the Union. And the South, there's the Confederate States of America. These are all little battle sites here. These are the border states or uncontested buffer zones here, at which the North ended up taking. The North ended up taking these states, regardless if they didn't want to join. They wanted to be neutral, but they had no choice but to join the North, right? And Lincoln provoked the war. Of course he did. They had to provoke. The Crown was putting pressure. The banking industrial complex was putting pressure on the North. So imagine trying to go, you're in the North and you walk into a very busy bar or a little pub, a bar, and you would walk in as a war correspondent. You'd come in and say, okay, young men, let's all get dressed. You're going to leave your young families. We're going to go free the slaves in the South. Nobody will buy that war. Nobody will buy that. Nobody will go. You have to sell a war. And telling young men in the North that they're going to go fight to free slaves, they're going to say, I'm not going to lose my family or die. But unfortunately, they need to wrap it around that. They need that web to wrap it around. And they don't tell you that Southern leaders of the Civil War period placed the blame on the outbreak of fighting squarely on Lincoln. They accused the president of acting aggressively towards the South and of deliberately provoking war in order to overthrow the Confederacy. So they're provoking. Confederacy is growing. More and more countries do not want to be part of the Union. The Confederacy sought a peaceful accommodation of its legitimate claims to independence. So it was done through the people wanting secession from the North, and resorted to measures of self-defense only when threatened by Lincoln's claims to independence and resorted to measures of self-defense. Policy. Thus, Confederative Vice President Alexander H. Stephens claimed that the war was inaugurated by Mr. Lincoln. Stephens readily acknowledged the great General Beauregard's troops fired the first gun. Right? The first gun. But he argued the larger truth is that in personal or rational conflicts, it is not who strikes the first blow or fires the first gun that inaugurates or begins the conflict. Rather, the true aggressor is the first who renders force necessary. So Lincoln provoked the war. But, what's going on? Well, let's go overseas, because a lot of this war started because of overseas, right? The United Kingdom and Great Britain and Ireland remained officially neutral throughout the American Civil War. Yeah, right. Wikipedia's telling you it did, right? It legally recognized the belligerent status of the Confederate States of America, CSA, but never recognized it as a nation, and neither signed a treaty with it or exchanged ambassadors. So you have to go to Great Britain for permission to separate. If you want to create your own country, you need to go to Great Britain for permission. Over 90% of Confederate trade with Britain ended. And who was funding it? British banks was funding the North. Of course they have to. They have to fund the North. So Barings Bank was the British merchant bank based in London, and one of England's oldest merchants bank, collaborator, blah, blah, blah. And it basically funded the war in the North. And in 1851, Baring and Bates brought in another American, Russell Sturgis, in 1805 to 1887 as a partner, despite the embarrassment to his partners caused by his sympathies for the South American Civil War. Sturgis provided a capable banker. Baring did not deal in the U.S. bonds, but it did help fund American purchases of armaments. They funded the whole North, and they worked hard funding the Union, right? Because who's going to pay them taxes to the crown, right? Once you secede from paying taxes, like let's say I wanted to secede my house, my territory, my land from the Canadian government. Well, they're going to come here by force and take it back and put some foreign investors in here. Because once you stop paying taxes to the crown, once you stop paying taxes to your government, your municipality, they come after you with force and they put you in prison, even though you think you own what you have. And manpower. Let's go into manpower. From a population of 8 million at the onset of the famine, the population of Ireland by 1861 dropped by 3 million, with 1/3 having died of famine. So a lot of this was engineered by the British, right? The Irish famine of 1861. Very hard to find information on that. The Irish famine of 1861 refers to the famine that occurred in 1861 in Ireland, and the western part was hit the hardest. In 1861, there were reports of famine in Ireland. This was actually worse than the potato famine 10-15 years previous. But it's kind of weird how this one hasn't made the history books. Why? Because as Irish people came to the northern United States and New York Harbor, they were handed a gun as they arrived. They were handed a gun and told to fight for their country and to go fight the South. In 1861, this is under Irish Chronicles News. Very hard to find this information. The American Civil War broke out in 1861. The Irish regiments made up of immigrants were formed and fought in the conflict. So Irish regiments made up of immigrants were formed and fought in the conflicts. Some leading members of the Fianna Brotherhood were closely involved in the process and firmly believed that the military experience gained would be an assistance to future rebellion in Ireland. So Belfast shipbuilding established, and that was very important to bring goods over and people. They were smuggling people by an engineered famine by the English, the British, whatever you want to call them, engineered a famine in Ireland, forcing the Irish to leave. And we talked about this. Again, people are probably listening to this and Mike, you've been talking about this for 10 years on your channel. I'm putting this now together so it kind of makes all total sense here. And what happened? Well, what did the British did not like? Well, America creating its own currency. The South did. But then the North created a currency of free money issued by the United States between 1861 and 1865. Abraham Lincoln created the greenbacks. And this was a big no-no to the British crown. So when the greenback, before the Civil War, the United States used gold and silver coins as its official currency. Paper currency in the form of banknotes was issued by privately owned banks, and notes being redeemable for spices at the bank's office, right? And I think this is spice. I think that was the name of the currency, right? Like there was another currency that was circulating that had that same name. And the solution came from Colonel Dick Taylor, an Illinois businessman who was serving as a volunteer officer. Taylor met with Lincoln in 1862 and suggested issuing an unbacked paper money. On February 25th, 1862, Congress passed the first legal tender act, which authorized the issuance of $150 million in banknotes. That would be $3.24 billion in today's notes in 2021. And the Crown of England did not like the fact, and the Crown of England did not want to be paid back in Yankee greenbacks. They wanted to be paid back in gold and silver. That's why they, before, with the whole Kansas thing, they were issuing that banks have gold and silver in reserves, so when you pay back the Bank of England, that money's good. They would take that money back from England, knock on the bank window and say, I want this exchange to gold and silver right now. And that's what the British had planned. That's what they wanted. Once the Yankee greenback hit the scene, that became a big problem. But it actually was a good thing in the North. In the North, it was actually... the economy was thriving with this currency. The economy, because it was independent off the crown, was actually free of taxation and paying interest back on the currency. It was actually moving around from hand to hand. It was actually being used in commerce and groceries and purchases of fuel and this and that. It actually was working, and the British were taking note of that, how an independent currency would work. But unfortunately, that wasn't allowed. So here is the South here. A lot of regiments fighting for the South. A lot of blacks fought in the regiments in the South. And now with digital book burning and the digital book burning, and with the removal of history and rewriting the history in the name of saving you and saving your life and saving you from the truth, unfortunately, there is very little to no mention, but the voices are still living on. There is a Facebook page called Black Confederate Soldiers, and it goes into a lot of things that we didn't talk about here, and wow, that goes really deep here, and a lot of things that are very hidden. A lot of things. See, a Yankee doctor's eyewitness account of 3,000 armed black Confederates marching through Maryland. They all had arms. They are all armed as a sword from his Confederate father in the Confederacy. And it was not about the whole slave thing. It was all about economy, folks. It was all about the crown. There was one here I wanted to read for you guys. 1845, just 15 years before South Carolina and her sister state seceded from the Union, John Quincy Adams and fellow New Englanders so opposed the admission of Texas to the Union that they threatened secession. No one ever challenged their right to do so. They were given the right to secede, by the way. See if I could find. Was one here. Yes. In their own words, Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant explained secession is legal. Dare I say, Yankees' hypocrisy. On the 31st of October... Oh, no, that's a Halloween story. I just want to see if I could find it here. Lincoln admitted that throughout the issuing of the Emancipation Proclamation Act would result in the massacre of women and children in the South. No mass insurrection ever took place. However, the violence that did occur as results of Lincoln's document took place in the North. I did not know this. I looked into this, and it's right. So the whole thing of the South rising, or the slaves rising, it only took place in the North. According to Rhodes in History of the United States, volume, 4, page 344, says Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation was not issued from a humane standpoint. Lincoln hoped it would incite the Negroes to rise against the women and children. His Emancipation Proclamation was intended only as a punishment for seceding states. See, this was after the Civil War, right? It was with no thought of freeing the slaves, more than 300,000 slaveholders, then in the Northern Army, and included slaveholders Ulysses S. Grant and his wife. So there's a rumor and a myth for years that are going around that the North held slaves 7 years longer than the South did, right? So there's a lot of things that are happening here. When you secede from the crown, you are a racist. You want to have a gold-backed currency? You're a racist. You want independence? You want to gain independence? You want a province or a state to gain independence from the Union? You're a racist. You are a bigot. Things not working economically and you don't want to move, but you want to rally your neighbors and friends and family behind a cause that's going to free them from the banks and the enslavement of the banking system? Well, you're a racist for that. And that's what they've done now. They've taken everything to a point where it has created divide. And they've created divide through multiple things, through global warming and climate change. People are divided at the household, right? And there's people that trusted the science during the sickness. A lot of people trusted the science. I didn't trust the science. I told you not to trust the science, right? A lot of things. And then now they want to change. Now they want to erase that history. Now they want to pretend I never said that. We never forced you to take anything. What are you talking about? So they're playing that card now. Anyways, guys, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Secession, the real reason why the American Civil War, or what they're telling you today about the American... Let me rephrase that. What they're telling you about the American Civil War isn't what it is and never was what they say it is. It's all lies. It's deception. It's to trick you. It's to motivate you to take a side. And it's 2023 now, October 23rd. And we're still taking sides. And they're pushing us into sides. I stand for the people in the middle that are getting basically destroyed by this. And if you want to secede, you're a racist. Mike Martin's here. I have spoken.